Good morning. It's Michelle, and I'm back with another episode. Today, we're going to talk about feeling better, right? Because we feel like in most goals, the point of doing a goal or getting rid of our overeating and stress eating is going to make us feel better. But I want to give you a different way to think about it. Welcome to the Cut the Stress Show, formerly the I Cut the Mustard Show, where you'll learn how to stop stressing, stop stress eating, and finally create the body that you can enjoy forever. If you're ready to lighten up, pun intended, then you're in the right place because you shouldn't have to hate creating the body that you love. Okay, well, so I know we've been talking a lot about weight loss off and on, and I kind of wanted to dive back into overeating and emotional eating and just controlling yourself with food because that's what I love to talk about, right? So I think one of the reasons that we turn to food is to feel better, right? Whenever something happens in our lives, we're feeling bad, or it's the end of the day and we just feel tired and we're stressed out, we want to feel better, right? Or you want to reward yourself with a treat like we talked about. So today I want to talk about why that is. Why are we so anxious to feel better, right? What is so bad about feeling bad? Does that even make sense, right? So let's dive into it a little bit. This week, I was talking to some of the ladies in my Lose 20 Pounds in 12 Weeks course, and everybody was just kind of feeling disappointed that day. And we were talking about emotions, and one of the main emotions that a lot of people were feeling on the call was disappointed. And so for one lady in particular, we were just diving into it and like, what does it mean to feel disappointed? And why are you so anxious to get rid of it? And we were just really exploring this idea. And I thought it was really just an interesting exploration, and I wanted to share it with you. So on this call, she was feeling disappointed, and we were practicing just sitting with that emotion and just being disappointed. And I could tell that she wasn't really excited to sit with it. And none of us are. This is like one of the hardest skills to learn is just to sit and be disappointed, or sit and be sad, or sit and be angry without going out and doing something about it. But it's such an important skill to learn, right? So I was asking her, I could tell that she just wanted to get it over with and to not be disappointed anymore. So we were diving in like, why is it that you want to get rid of this disappointment? And I think it really boiled down to the fact that whenever we're disappointed, whenever we're angry, whenever we're sad, or when we're depressed, right? One of the reasons that you want to move out of that emotion is because you're making it mean something about you, right? There's something about the emotion that you are judging, and therefore you want to get rid of it because you don't want to be associated with that emotion. So let me give you an example with this discouragement, right? So let's think about people who are discouraged all the time. What are your thoughts? This is a great thing to think about. What are your thoughts about someone? Be really honest with yourself. What are your thoughts about someone who's disappointed all the time or who's discouraged all the time? What are your thoughts about that person who is just kind of sad and blue and depressed, and they come to the party and they're just feeling down? Right? What are your thoughts about that person and the fact that they're feeling depressed or sad or discouraged, right? And I think a lot of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, and I see this a lot on social media, especially people who are sad or depressed, like for some reason, we just don't understand that. For us, for some reason, it feels wrong. It feels bad. You shouldn't feel that way, right? Or there's some magical amount of time that's okay. Like it's okay to feel discouraged or depressed for 20 minutes, but if it's longer than that, then it's not okay, right? Like there's just like this unspoken assumption that a little bit's okay, but a lot is not okay, right? So we just have a lot of judgments about people who are feeling discouraged or people who are feeling depressed, right? because we're making it mean something about them, or we're making it mean something about us if we're in that state. So if I'm discouraged or depressed all the time, then maybe I'm making it mean that I'm a bad person. Or maybe I'm making it mean that there's something wrong with me, right? I must be broken. Maybe I'm making it mean that I'm bringing other people down, right? I'm ruining their lives, and I'm ruining my life if I'm discouraged. And that's a lot of heavy stuff, right? Or I shouldn't be this way. Even that simple thought of I shouldn't be feeling so discouraged, or I shouldn't be discouraged for too long. All of those thoughts and judgments about our emotions are really, really heavy. And it's actually layering on top of the emotion that we're already having. So if you're originally feeling depressed or discouraged, and then unconsciously, most of us don't realize this is going on, but then we're judging our discouragement, right? We're judging that we're discouraged, or we're depressed that we're depressed. We're disappointed about being disappointed. So we're like have this double layer of emotions going on that's making it even deeper and harder to solve. So the reason I would argue that one of the reasons that we want to get out of our emotions is because we're making it mean something about ourselves, right? If I think that I shouldn't be discouraged very long, and if I am discouraged very long, then I must be depressed, or I'm bringing other people down, then I really don't want to be in that situation for very long, right? So if I can go eat something and I feel a little bit better, then that seems like a good solution, right? Because then I'm not a bad person, right? I've gotten out of that judgment of myself of being a bad person, and I've moved on to eating or something else, right? But what if emotions actually don't mean anything, right? What if they don't mean anything about who you are, what kind of person you are? What if your emotions can't affect other people, right? All of these statements that I just mentioned, all these judgments that we have about our emotions, what if they're really just not true at all, right? What if there's no specific amount of time that it's okay to be discouraged? Maybe there's not a specific amount of time that you're supposed to like switch and not be discouraged, right? Maybe it's okay to be discouraged as long as you need to be. Because those emotions, I'm always asking my clients, where did those emotions come from? And we talked about it in previous episodes. They're just coming from your thoughts. That's where emotions come from. They come from your thoughts. Or they maybe are coming from a chemical imbalance, but either way, it's not you. You are separate from your emotions. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You're something else entirely. That's not who you are. It's just something part of what you do, right? It's not who you are. It's part of what you do. So the fact that you're feeling angry or discouraged or disappointed, any of these negative emotions that we don't want to feel, that doesn't mean anything about you except that you're having a thought that's creating that emotion. Or maybe in some cases, there's some kind of chemical imbalance that's creating that emotion for you, right? So it doesn't mean anything about you or who you are or your value. It just means that you're having a thought that's creating that emotion. And I might add that it's perfectly normal as people in the world to have emotions, right? We are wired to be happy and to be sad and to be angry. We're wired to be angry. We're wired to be afraid, right? All of these different emotions have a purpose in our lives, and they're there to signal us about things. They're just information for us. So it's perfectly normal for you to have an emotion. It doesn't mean anything about your value or who you really are on the inside. It just means that you're a person thinking a thought. So a lot of times whenever I am kind of stuck inside an emotion like feeling discouraged or sad or upset or disappointed, then sometimes I just like to tell myself, you know what? I am a woman feeling disappointed, or like I'm just a mom feeling disappointed, or I'm just a business owner feeling discouraged, right? It takes me outside of my emotion and I'm just a person and I have this thing going on, but it doesn't mean anything about me. So that's one thing. And then kind of going back to some of those thoughts that I brainstormed, those judgments that we brainstormed about what judgments you might be having whenever you're having an emotion. One of the other big ones is that maybe you shouldn't be feeling that way because it's causing other people to feel bad too. So this particular person I was talking to that day was saying, I don't want to be discouraged for so long because I've been around people who are discouraged and that's discouraging, right? And if I'm discouraged, that's dragging people down. Or if I'm angry or disappointed, then I'm getting angry or disappointed at my kids and that's ruining their lives essentially, right? So there's this idea that if I'm feeling a negative emotion, then it's making other people feel negative emotion. But what we just mentioned, what I just asked you was, where do those emotions come from, right? They come from our thoughts or possibly a chemical imbalance, right? So you aren't inside somebody else's body, right? You cannot create their emotions because you're not in their body, right? You cannot make them have thoughts. You're not having the thoughts that they're having. They are totally in control of that. And their body, is in control of its own chemical balance, right? So there's nothing that you can do to make them depressed. Right? It might be easier for them to choose to be depressed whenever they see you depressed, but that's totally their choice. It's not you making them more depressed. Does that make sense? And I think that's a really important distinction. And it's easy to say whenever you're not in the emotion, like, oh, of course, you can't make anyone mad. You can't make anyone sad. But it sure feels like it because we intuitively can feel each other, right? And a lot of times, these thoughts, they feel automatic and they feel involuntary, but what I want to suggest is that they are not. I'm hoping that this is making sense for you so far. Again, you always have the option to email me or ask me what I am even talking about or comment on the post below on Facebook whenever I post these. But another piece of this that I think will kind of shed some light on what I was just talking about is the way that we can react to our emotions, right? So far we've talked about what are emotions really? What are they? They are thoughts. They're caused by thoughts in our brain that trigger a chemical reaction, or maybe there's some sort of chemical reaction going on, as with depression or something like that. But essentially they're coming from your thoughts. And then what does it mean? Right? What do they mean whenever we're feeling emotions? And we talked about how it means nothing except that you're just having the emotion, right? It doesn't mean that there's even any danger going on necessarily. If you're afraid, it doesn't mean that there's danger going on. It just means that you think there's danger going on, right? And same with being disappointment. It's just your interpretation of the world is creating this chemical reaction, this feeling in your emotion in your body. Okay, so that's what they are and what they mean. So I want to talk a little bit more then about how emotions affect our lives. So in the past, we talked about how there's just facts, there's circumstances out in the world, there's situations that happen, and then you have thoughts about those. You interpret those situations, you have thoughts about what they mean, and then those thoughts are creating your emotions. Now, from there, we talked about how we act out our emotions, whether we want to or not. It kind of shows up in the way that we're acting, right? So I'm sure we all know, you can all tell if someone is kind of feeling a little bit off, that maybe they're discouraged or disappointed, but they're pretending to be happy. They got their smile plastered on their face, but you can kind of feel that that's not really how they're feeling, right? So that emotion shows up in your life, no matter how you're trying to pretend, even if you're trying to pretend to be something else or feel something else. So that's one way that emotions affect our lives, is they come out in our actions, and then our actions produce our results, right? So what I want to kind of dial into though is your emotions affect your actions, but there's a lot of different ways that your emotions can affect your actions, and you have a lot of choices here. So whenever I talk about the model, and I kind of tell my clients too that you can interrupt the model anywhere you want to. So I can have a thought and I can stop and I can change my thought and I can create a different emotion and result in my life. Or I can kind of feel the emotion and then I can decide in that moment that I want to stop. I want to do something different with that emotion that's going to produce different results. So I'm just going to look for a minute at the emotion. Let's say you're having an emotion. Let's go back to discouragement. You're feeling discouraged. You've got several options about what you want to do with that feeling, right? You can, number one, you can just act it out, right? You can go mope around, right? You could, if you're discouraged, maybe you just want to sit in the chair for a while and like put your head in your hands. Maybe you want to cry a little bit, right? So you can move forward. You can act it out. Another thing that you can do is just try to ignore it, right? We can push it down and reject it and kind of ignore it. In which case, it's kind of like what I said before. You're just kind of pretending like you're not having that emotion. You plaster a smile on your face and you move forward, but everyone else can still kind of tell that you're feeling that way, right? That emotion's still coming with you. You just shoved it to the back and you're kind of carrying it along with you, right? So you can kind of reject it and repress it. You can act it out and it can show up in your actions of, putting your hand on your face, or maybe you're kind of talking like this, you're mumbling, right? It's going to come out in different ways. Or the other option, honestly, is to sit there and allow that emotion to be there, right? You can allow it to be there and you can just sit with it and feel that emotion all the way through. And then usually that's going to loosen it up a little bit and then you can move on. Okay. So I'm going to give you another example real quick before I move on to something else. So for example, let's say that I'm feeling angry, right? If I'm super angry, which normally we're judging that emotion thinking that's a bad emotion. We don't want to have that. You shouldn't be angry at people, right? But my options are, if I'm feeling angry, my options are, number one, I can go act it out. I can go yell at people. I can stomp. I can scream. I can do a lot of things, smash stuff, right? I can repress it and pretend like I'm not feeling angry. But then that's usually, whenever someone does talk to me, then I kind of snooty and I have snarky remarks back. Or maybe for me, right, if I'm really repressing my emotions, then it's just physically making me sick instead. Or I can just feel that anger. I can sit there and I can feel that anger and I can just kind of explore what it feels like or tap into it or whatever you need to do, right? So those are just some different ways that you can. Those are the different pathways, right? Whenever you're feeling an emotion, those are different pathways, different ways that you can proceed forward, right, with that emotion. But I want to talk to you about how important it is to just sit there and feel the emotion and how that's really going to serve you the most in the long run. Especially if it's a negative emotion that you feel like you shouldn't have, right? And how you're going to do this is you're going to stop judging that emotion, right? Whenever I'm feeling discouraged, actually this happened the same day. I was talking to these women about being discouraged and kind of coaching them on it. Later that day, I was so discouraged as well. And honestly, even on the call, I was feeling pretty discouraged. Maybe that's why everybody else was too. But I was feeling discouraged about something else and found myself wanting to judge it, right? Like, man, I shouldn't be discouraged right now because this is my family time and now I'm taking away from my family and I'm going to be dragging them down. And, so I was just having all these thoughts and judging myself. Okay. So the first thing that you want to do whenever you have an emotion that you just don't really like, right? A negative emotion. And the first thing that you want to do is to stop judging it, right? So in that moment, probably because I just had coached someone on it, I said, you know what? I'm going to stop judging this. I'm going to stop rejecting it also. And I decided that I was just going to feel discouraged for a while. And I gave myself permission to just be discouraged and it's going to be okay, right? So what that does is when I stopped judging it, it loosened things up for me, right? So instead of being discouraged and then feeling ashamed about my discouragement or feeling discouraged about my discouragement, I just let that second layer drop. And I said, I'm just a mom. and I'm feeling discouraged. Or I'm an entrepreneur who's feeling discouraged right now, and I'm just going to let myself do that. So I dropped the drama around it. We ate dinner. I wasn't super mopey about it. I was just allowing myself to be discouraged and engage as much as I wanted to or not in the conversation. And then shortly after dinner, I was reading my kids' books and stuff like that. And I just noticed that I wasn't really feeling discouraged anymore. Because I allowed myself to just be discouraged, and I didn't try to push it away. I didn't try to act it out. I didn't try to judge it or make myself different than I was. It just loosened it up so much, right? It instead of feeling like this burden that was really heavy, something I had to get rid of right now, I just let go of that a little bit. I loosened it up. I didn't have to deal with that second layer of emotion, and I let it be there. And like all things, it just moved on. My brain just moved on to something else. And because I didn't have that drama going on around it, because I didn't react to it and go eat something and perpetuate the situation, it could just move through me like a wave, and it wasn't even a big deal. So I wanted to share this experience with you because a lot of times it's just a little bit confusing to understand, how do you allow your emotion, number one, and what good is that really going to do? And a lot of times I think we resist. We don't want to allow our emotions because in some ways we're saying, oh, that's okay. Like if I just let myself feel discouraged, then I'm going to feel discouraged all the time. All right. Or if I'm letting myself do that, then I'm saying that it's okay. Right. Well, number one, I want to tell you that it is okay, right? Because it doesn't mean anything, which we discussed earlier. But just like with my experience, allowing that emotion doesn't mean that you're going to feel it all the time, because let's roll back around. Where do emotions come from? They come from our thoughts. So if I'm just allowing that emotion to be there and I'm not making a big deal out of it by judging it and thinking about it, then my brain is naturally going to move on to other things, right? I'm going to start thinking other things rather than brooding over that same thing, in which case I'm actually going to be able to move through it a lot faster. So I hope all of this is making sense. If you need to listen to this episode again, please do. There's a lot here, but I just wanted to give you that example and let you really see that emotions are no big deal. And if we can drop the judgment about our emotions, life is going to be so much better, right? Because the point is to feel better, right? No. So I started this episode by saying that the point isn't to feel better, right? Whenever I am feeling bad and I want to just like hurry and get out of the emotion and feel better right away, that's not the whole point, right? The point isn't to feel better, to switch it over right that second, because those emotions have a part in our lives. And if we've never been sad, we don't know what happy is, right? And just like we need all the colors in the rainbow to have a beautiful, gorgeous world, right? That makes it, the colors make it amazing and diverse. The same is true for our emotions. The different kind of emotions that we have and we allow ourselves to experience makes our life fuller and richer. So the point isn't to feel happy all the time. It's not to feel peaceful all the time or accepting all the time. It's to just let yourself have that kaleidoscope of emotions going on in your life, because it's beautiful, and it's letting yourself move through that without judgment is going to help you enjoy life a lot more. Your life's going to be so much richer and fuller because of it. So I'm going to argue that the point isn't to feel better. The point is to feel. It's to just allow yourself to feel and to be okay with that. So try that this week. If you have any questions, hop over to my Facebook page and just write a little comment under this episode. Let me know what you thought or what questions you have about it. I'd be happy to answer them there. More than happy to engage with you there. And as always, if you love this episode, go ahead and shoot it on to a friend who you know might need it. And I will see you guys next week. Yoo-hoo! Thanks for joining me. And if you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend and make sure you're subscribed as well so that you can come back here and we can cut the stress together next week.